Welcome back, everybody. Now it is my honor to introduce to you Her Excellency, the Philippine Ambassador, Ms. Maria Zenaida Angara-Colinson. Please.
You can see how well prepared the organizers are. They've even lowered the microphone for me. Mr. Anders Paulsen, and I will not mention everybody's names, you're all equally important, but the representatives, officials of the Coral Guardians and the Philippine Reef and Rainforest Conservation Foundation, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. The children tonight sang in Filipino without any piece of paper. The ambassador of the Philippines needs these two pieces of paper to say a few words in Swedish and in English. Det är en ära att få tala inför er ikväll om en fråga som är väldigt viktig för Filippinerna. Den marina miljön betyder väldigt mycket för våra dagliga liv. Den är en viktig inkomstkälla för mer än 1 miljon filippiner och genererar årligen ungefär 2,5 miljarder dollar genom bland annat fiske och turism. Vi är också medvetna om hur den binder samman andra regionala och globala marina miljöer och hur den reglerar jordens ömtåliga klimat. A few years ago, a study entitled The Center of Marine Shore Fish Diversity identified the Philippines as the most diverse marine ecosystem in the world. The study's findings were supported by at least 100 scientists who concluded that our seas had a higher concentration of species per unit area than anywhere else. For example, we have 488 out of 500 known species of corals. We have at least 5 of the 8 known kinds of marine turtles. Our coastline, at 36,289 kilometers, is one of the longest in the world and home to at least 1,755 different kinds of reef fishes. Yet, while the Philippines has been hailed as a center for biodiversity, the unfortunate truth is that our country is also a hotspot for the number of marine species that are endangered or threatened with extinction. At the same time, the Philippines is also extremely vulnerable to climate change. The scientific community tells us that out of the 2.7 million hectares of coral reefs, only 5% remain in pristine condition. The rest is in varying stages of damage as a result of destructive human activities. I have 10 more pages, so just sit back and relax. The threat is real, exacerbated by the specter of scarcity because of the pressures of our country's growing population. Scientists have warned that the productivity of our marine resources is now down to an alarming 10%. The degradation of our marine environment means that we are turning nature into an enemy, which will eventually connive with natural hazards to reciprocate the kind of treatment that we have given it. When disasters strike, our ailing environment will intensify the risks to our people's livelihoods and their communities. A better and sustainable balance between economic needs and environmental preservation must be achieved. The Philippine government is acutely aware of this important task. It is continuing its programs aimed at preserving our country's vulnerable species and habitats. Among them, the Coral Triangle Initiative in cooperation with our neighbors in the region. At the local level, the Philippine Department of Environment and Natural Resources is moving forward an integrated coastal management program together with local governments, communities, the private sectors, and NGOs. Many are now working for this important cause, and allow me to commend the Coral Guardians and its partnership with the Philippine Reef and Rainforest Conservation Foundation for their contribution to a healthier and more sustainable marine environment in the Philippines. I'm personally heartened by the progress done in Dalugan Island, now a marine reserve and wildlife sanctuary. What binds us here is our common concern, because after all, the seas bind not only the Philippines with its neighbors, but yes, with Sweden as well, as we were told. It's great to be here, ladies and gentlemen. I am humbled by this initiative taken by the Coral Guardians. And last but not least, allow me to greet Anders Paulsen a very happy birthday. The celebration will be at home, in my home tomorrow. Thank you all, have a good evening.
uplifting. I'm like this. We had Anders at our work the other day at the university, and he played at Pete and Jerry that you will hear tonight was there and gave some speeches for the researchers that couldn't be here tonight. And we had this music in this building where all these scientists are sitting, and it was like, I want to have it like this every day. So I'm very happy to be here. And now we will have a session to look into and discuss under the topic coral reefs. Why should we care? It is obvious. And first we will listen to Pete. And Pete is the founder and the CEO of the Coral Cay Conservation. And Coral Cay Conservation works to support conservation, among other things, by having volunteers coming to work at coral reefs. And this is what Anders did in the 90s. And Peter will tell us more under the title From Local Livelihoods and Citizen Science to Global Scale.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Madam Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen, Anders, my dear friend, happy birthday to you. And remember, you're only as old as the saxophone you feel. Why should we care about coral reefs? Well, I've got big boots to fill, because we've had some excellent presentations from previous speakers, and they've kind of stolen my thunder, really. So I'm going to skip through some of this. And also, I've got 10 minutes to talk, but I really don't want to, because I'd rather have an interactive panel session. I think it's more relevant to this audience. Coral reefs, they are the rainforests of the sea. They are the most biodiverse ecosystem on Earth. They cover just a few % of our oceans, and yet account for, say, the greatest biodiversity, the greatest number of marine species. They really are also the larder of the sea, the larder of the planet. They are so productive. They support an awful lot of people. The ecosystem services that we hear about, that's kind of a sexy term, isn't it? But basically they provide food security and direct livelihood for 700 million people around the planet directly. Indirectly, they provide those services for all of us, but directly, every day, about 700 million people depend on healthy coral reefs for their livelihoods, for their food, for their security. For us, we found recently that coral reef species are a new source of very important drugs in the fight against cancer and AIDS, and we're finding more as we bioprospect for active pharmaceuticals from coral reefs. And they are our very own solar-powered shore defences. They protect small low-lying islands, the Maldives being a classic example of that, and they do it for free. The threats, well, the bad news. Well, we've heard a bit about that, and again, I'm not going to dwell on it. We've heard about the threats to the coral reefs from overfishing, from destructive fishing practices, use of dynamite, cyanide on coral reefs, and so on, all very destructive. Pollution we know about, and climate change, ocean acidification, ocean warming, and so on. We've also heard that roughly, the science is out on this, but something like 2/3 of the world's coral reefs, as we speak, are degraded, and some of them are gone, and they are beyond recovery. And the estimate is by this magic year, 2055, I don't know who dreamed that one up, but apparently 2055, if things continue the way they are, it's going to be all over for coral reefs. About 90% will disappear, or again, beyond recovery. Coming back to that point, if that's the case, that's only about 30 years away or so. That's a generation. What happens to those 700 million people? What do they do then? What do they do now? Where do they go? It's pretty appalling, apocalyptic vision. My glass is always half full, it's never half empty, and I'm always a positive thinker. Our oceans cover about 71% of our planet, but unfortunately less than 0.5% of our oceans are actually in any meaningful state of protection. Marine protected areas is the term used. There are approximately about 7,000 or so, no one really knows the figure, declared marine protected areas. And each of those actually on average is only about 5 kilometres square in size. But most of those, or a great deal of those, unfortunately what we call paper parks. They're just there on paper. There's no proper management, there's no proper implementation, enforcement of rules and regulations. A lot of them are put there as a feel-good factor for governments, unfortunately. Some 10 years or so, the world got together and the great and the good decided that, look, by 2012 we must set aside at least 10% of our oceans as protected areas, fully protected areas. Well, we know we're less than 0.5% of reaching that target. So we should have had 10% by next year. And indeed, if we carry on at the rate we're going, then we'll only reach that target maybe by 2050. Now remember that magic year, 2055. 10% 2055, 90% coral reefs gone 2055. You do the maths. The real wisdom now is that we need to up the ante, and we really need to be looking at 30% set aside of the oceans if we're really going to make a significant dent in the trend downwards and the decline of our systems. Well, if we carry on the way we're going, at a snail's pace that governments are driving this, then we might reach that by the year 2092. Come back to that year 2055. Okay. Well, my glass is always half full. The really, really good news is that, given a chance, the science is now showing that coral reefs are far more resilient than we thought they were if they're given a chance. It's just like a healthy human being. You're healthy, you catch a cold, you recover. If you're unhealthy and you're having lots of other diseases put at you, you may well give up the ghost and go to the big coral reef in the sky. So the real issue here is that we need to provide coral reefs with a breather, a chance to adapt, to develop the resilience they need to adapt to climate change. And there is some really, really good research coming out now that coral reefs are adapting much, much faster than the pessimists thought they could and would. And in fact, it's going against some sort of Darwinian trends. The good news, most of all, and that's why we're here today, tonight, is that there are communities around the world saying enough is enough, and they are getting their own acts together and declaring and developing their own functional, community-managed, community-based marine protected areas. And the Philippines is a global leader in the way forward in this. Now, I've been very privileged to work in the Philippines in partnership with my very good friend Jerry Ledesma from the Philippine Reef and Rainforest Conservation Foundation in assisting in a small way with that. These small marine protected areas are easy to manage. They're manageable at the local level. They're very low tech to manage, very low cost to manage. You can manage a marine protected area for a few $1,000s a year. You're not talking the megabucks that the World Bank and other people like to think you should be pumping money into. Low cost, easy to do, and the benefits are pretty much immediate. Now, by that I mean 12 to 15 months. We're starting to see a big increase in the fish densities, in the biomass of fish. Fishermen are going out catching more for less time out fishing. Alternative livelihoods are generating as a result of this. They're small-scale, community-based tourism programs. Every scuba diver wants to go and dive in a marine protected area because the corals are better, there's more fish to see. And that generates local income, and it stays locally, it doesn't go out. You don't have the big resorts there taking money out of the country or taking dividends. It stays within the community. And again, the Philippines is just one of the best countries I've ever worked in to show leadership and how that can be done. And I've learned far more than I've actually put in terms of my own work in conservation. Most importantly of all, it provides hope, it provides local ownership, and provides the theme here that they become coral guardians. And this is what tonight's all about. And the great thing about the work in the Philippines is there's lots of community exchanges going on. One community sets up as a functional marine protected area. It's very easy to bring other communities to that and see it working, and they go back and echo it. And before you know it, there's this chain reaction of marine protected areas being developed around the world. My own organisation, for 26 years now, I've been engaging the public and encouraging them to become what I call citizen scientists, volunteers. People off the street, never done this kind of thing before in their lives. We take them out onto the Reef Project area, we train them up, we get them involved so they're hands-on. A lot of people, I think, public around the world, are jaded, to put it mildly, of giving lots of money to another organisation and hope that they do something good with that money. The tide is turning, the public is saying, look, we've heard the bad news, we keep hearing the bad news, there must be good news. There is, and you can actively get involved, get out there and do it yourself and contribute to these conservation measures. And as I said, one of the best examples that I've been involved with is the Danhugen Island marine protected area, where I was invited by Jerry back in 1994 to assist. So we sent in loads of volunteers, and over a matter of a few years, surveyed all those reefs, found the areas that were particularly good candidate sites for marine protected areas. They were protected. Job done. On a global scale, there's a big move now. Governments are slowly moving towards setting up these mega marine protected areas, these huge areas. And they go hand in hand with the small marine protected areas. The world needs both. And so we are seeing areas, large areas of coral reefs around the world now being declared. In fact, my government, the British government last year, finally declared the Chagos area, which is right in the middle of the Indian Ocean, as a full no-take marine protected area. It's over 500,000 square kilometres of reefs and 55 tiny islands and you name it. They've actually done that. Now, that's a very bold step for any government to make. It's difficult to set those things up, and there's all sorts of parameters that limit you doing those things. So there is note being taken globally, at national level and international level. But really, for me, the change makers, the coral guardians, are the local communities, and they're the ones that inspire me to carry on to do what I do. I've got a little saying here. It's my mantra that's kept me going for the last 26 years in conservation, and it's this: until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. That the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issued from the decision, raising in one's favour all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings, which no man or woman could have dreamed would have come his or her way. Whatever you can do, or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Tonight, thanks to Landers, magic is happening. Tonight, we are being bold. And tonight, we are all coral guardians. Thank you.
Together with some research colleagues, please. Here first in line, it's Magnus Nyström. He's a coral reef ecologist at Stockholm Resilience Center, and you have an extensive field experience from coral reef expeditions to both Thailand, Belize, and the Philippines. Welcome. And Kajsa Garpe, she's the policy officer for tropical marine ecosystems and fisheries at Swedish Society for Nature Conservation. That is Svenska Naturskyddsföreningen for all Swedish knowledgeable. And Jerry Ledesma, he's the founder of the Philippine Reef and Rainforest Conservation Foundation. And Jerry, you have the Dantugan Island, the conservation site where Anders came to die in the 1990s. I would like to begin to ask you to tell us, how did it come that you started to work with coral reefs? Kajsa.
Very simple, actually. I was absolutely amazed by the beauty, by the multitude of life forms, of functions, of colours on a reef when I first dived on one. And there was really nothing else I wanted to do than to learn more about this ecosystem. And I had the opportunity to study it during some years, and now I'm privileged enough and have the responsibility to more look into the implications of its sustainable situation that these reefs face, and the solutions for local resource users in coral reef areas.
Thank you. Would you like to continue, Magnus?
Absolutely, because I have a slightly different experience actually. I did not know anything about coral reefs until 1994, absolutely nothing. When I was given the opportunity by some very kind supervisors to go and do my master's in Thailand. And they sent me to a reef, I didn't know it then, but the crappiest reef I've ever seen in my whole life. The water was murky, the water was heavily polluted, and the reef was completely overfished. And I thought it was just fantastic. And since that day, I'm positively surprised wherever I go.
Jerry, please tell us.
I started looking at coral reefs when I was a diver in the early 70s. And it was the reefs that I first thought was teeming with fish, visibility 40 meters, even when it was raining. And then I also saw the gradual deterioration until 1990. I thought of maybe we should start investigating. So this little island, 43-hectare island, the Nomen Island, we rented a small area, a 1-hectare area, and there we started conservation. I'm no scientist, but we looked at causes, we looked at why. And so in 1994, we thought of buying the island, and we didn't have money. It was like poker. Is the island for sale? How much? And your price. They gave us a price, and I almost swallowed. It's too expensive for our terms. But then we did an international fundraising. We were helped by an organization, World Land Trust, in the United Kingdom. And then that started it all. And I met this guy, Pete, and then the real scientific work started. So here we are, and Ambassador Angara saying that we were rich. Number one in fish, number one in corals, but also number one in the rate of destruction. That's why I'm here.
Thank you. Pete, do you like to add something about your background, starting with corals?
Yeah, basically, I trained as a marine biologist and biochemist and went into academia and got absolutely bored, silly in academia, and staring down a test tube all day. And then in 1985, I got very, very drunk in a pub in Cambridge and had this cathartic moment that perhaps there's something more to life than staring down a test tube. And came up with this idea of coral key conservation, and the rest is history.
That makes me ask you, Kajsa. This is coming and going. Maybe I should. Does it work now? Johan gave us the global picture of the threats to the reefs, but here in Sweden, I mean, our perspective, it's far away. How does it link to us? Because that's also the necessity to understand the linkages. That's where we also find the solutions. Kajsa, would you?
Yeah, I think it does link to us a lot more than we actually think. There are direct linkages and there are indirect linkages. One very direct link is, of course, for those who have the opportunity to travel to a reef and dive a reef. But that's nothing we can do too often. But that is, of course, a very direct link. But there are others. We have heard of the global ones. We've heard of the importance for the climate regulation, for example. But I'd like to link it a little bit on fisheries. And it's, as consumers, very often we see coral reef fish in our stores or in our restaurants. It does actually happen, though. We get the occasional parrotfish here. And it is important, I think, to remember that it's our demand for fish that is driving the world's overfishing, and our demand that's also driving the sort of a sequential exploitation of resources. When we don't have fish in Europe, we start importing fish to Europe. And I don't know how many knows that 60% of all the fish we consume in Europe is imported. And out of those 40% that we actually produce ourselves, 21% of those are caught in foreign waters by EU fleets fishing under fishing agreements with other countries, amongst others in the Pacific Ocean. And that is something that it is our policy now. Europe has a common fisheries policy, and Sweden is a part of the EU. So that is our politics that is causing that. And the industrial fishing fleets are actively affecting the small-scale fishers, the artisanal fishers, and pushing them closer to the reef, or pushing them to remain on the reef, to overfish the reefs, and the resources that may be fished upon by the industrial fleet may also have some part of their life on the reef, and in that way we are causing an imbalance on the reef through our consumption, through our politics here. And I think also we will probably get back to when we talk more about the Philippines, that as world citizens we also have a responsibility of global solidarity with all those millions of people that are closely dependent on these resources and have no other choices on what to feed their families or how to make a living than to actually fish in coastal waters. And finally, I think also for many of us, I think more than perhaps we often think of, the reefs have some sort of intrinsic value. This is a heritage. It's interlinked with all the marine ecosystems and all the ecosystems in the world, and it's a heritage that we want to bring to our children. At least I do, and I think many of us will do.
Thank you. And Jerry, you live with the reefs. You work on the reefs in the Philippines. So tell us more about the local perspective and how the reefs actually are a livelihood for people.
Well, coral gardens. I think we're in gratitude with the others because what we've now looked at, our development model, we always like to work on the ground. So Danhugan Island with its biodiversity, 7 ecosystems, a viable ecosystem, and then coral reefs and all that. For 244, half of the Philippines corals are around Danhugan. So we decided to open up Danhugan because it's an excellent natural classroom. So our project is to teach students. We pioneered in the Philippines the Youth Marine and Wildlife Camp. And now we're opening a new project, starting with the public school, elementary and high school students and teachers. But we hope with the effort that the youth, turning today's youth to the rural area to become the stewards tomorrow. I like to work like painting by the numbers when I was little. And our success is very slow. And when one is successful, we paint that. So we have the MBA now. But we need to educate on a larger scale. We're starting with 12 pilot schools, and if this is good, we intend to expand it, and maybe hope that others will follow. If we do painting by the numbers on a micro scale, perhaps if the success of Danhugan can also be painting by the numbers on a global scale.
So students from schools around the country come to this Danhugan Island and have classes there, courses for a week or longer. So students from the country come to the Danhugan.
Yes, we've been doing that since 1990, but now we're in a more relevant marine camp, teaching the public school students, the resource users. We've come to be certain that in the rural area, 95% of local chief executives, the politicians, resource users, businessmen, all come from the public school system. So that is why we are taking the long route, starting with elementary, and we did high school before, but we need a little bit more, we're taking a bit more effort to embed conservation of the rural area.
So we look forward to when students come to be the policymakers and decision makers in different activities. Magnus, we've been talking about global threats, but could there be local solutions to the global threats?
Absolutely, I think so, and I think that it's a very good question, because many times I hear this concern that what can I do as a local manager when I'm facing such, global stressors. And I think actually local management is definitely part of the solution. So I can give you an example. If you look at the worst coral mass bleaching event ever recorded, that was in 1998. That was a very rude wake-up call for many of us, just showing how vulnerable coral reefs are to climate change. And we lost approximately 16% of the world's reefs in that event, which is a very big number. Now, I also think that there were some positive signs coming out of that, actually. Sorry. And one thing being that reefs in areas with good water quality, with abundant fish populations, they actually were able to recover quite rapidly after this big global event. So that suggests that if we can have coral reefs in some kind of good shape, that would actually increase the likelihood that they can cope with these global stressors. And of course, the logic question is, how do we put them in good shape? Well, we do that by, sound local management. So, personally, I think that, good local management can actually, in a way, prepare reefs for all the anticipated climate change. But I would also kind of put up a warning finger, because local management is definitely not the panacea, right? Because if you remember Johan Rockström's all these hockey stick figures that he showed, bad things are increasing exponentially. We know that there are thresholds, and if you reach beyond some of these thresholds, corals will eventually die. There's no doubt about that. So we can buy time by sound local management, but it won't last forever. Okay, so to me, the solution is actually to work from both ends. So you work on a local scale with good sound management, but you also really have to deal with the global issues, carbon dioxide emissions and so forth. And speaking about connecting local and global, I think this event is kind of showing that, right? So.
Yes. And Pete, I think that's exactly what you were doing, aren't you? You're in the Coral Key Conservation, you have volunteers go to reefs and work and help out. Tell us more about it, for it feels like that's working from both ends, wouldn't you say?
Well, I think it's a part of it. It's a part of the machine. We're a small player, and you need lots and lots of small players, lots of small cogs to make up the clock, basically. And we play our small role by encouraging people just like yourselves to come and volunteer on these projects. You're paying your own way, your money contributes towards the cost of the financing of programs, as well as you actually getting out there and being involved with conservation. It does two things. It self-finances the conservation work, so you're not reliant on the vagaries of grants which come and go. You're not competing with other organisations for grants, which are becoming limited, as we know, in the world. It provides people with hands-on, actually getting in there and doing the work. We did a piece of work in Belize many, many years ago, and the UN did an audit on that, and they estimated that if they had to pay for it, and this was 15 years ago, it would have cost the UN over $5 million to do what the Coral Key volunteers effectively did for free. That's a lot of money, and it was then. As importantly, what it does is returns volunteers as coral reef ambassadors, as coral guardians, because they come back far more aware the issues because they've seen it. It's one thing to go on a web search and look at websites about coral reefs, but until you actually see them, the beauty, the threat, and see most importantly the interaction of the people that you're working with and their interaction on reefs, it's when the penny really drops. And this is a classic example of that, a volunteer with us. Look where we are now. Because he's unstoppable, it's like a roller coaster. And thank God for people like Anders and many more. So it's just one fine example of the tens of thousands of volunteers who have already gone through Coral Reef, and I hope many, many more to come.
With that, we will close this panel and we will continue next session. Thank you very much for your attention.
Good evening. The USC singers will now sing John Rutter's Look at the World, a song of praise and thanksgiving to the Lord for the beauty of the earth and for his abundant and wonderful creations. In place of Celebrate, we will be singing Gabaan. Gabaan is a contemporary work by Filipino composer Ruben Federizo. It is based on a folktale in the southern islands of the Philippines. It tells about the curse that has befallen the people of that place for their abuse of Mother Nature.